A lot more to food than what meets the fork. But sometimes you have to take things with a grain of salt. Coming up, when it comes to our favorite foods, things are never black and white. Is orange cheese a white lie? Was red velvet cake just a way to make more green? Does color affect our palates? Or do our eyes play tricks on our taste buds? Are they old wives' tales? Ancient elixirs? Or just clever marketing ploys? Every bite you take has a story. Every morsel a myth. Is it baked with fact or flavored with fiction? Not many foods can get away with being orange. We let oranges slide because, well, they're oranges. But what about cheese? Cheese. Cheese is made from notoriously white milk. But many of our favorite cheeses would be unrecognizable without that classic orange hue. So why do these wedges look like they fell asleep on a tanning bed? Is orange cheese showing its true colors? A crispy grilled sandwich with a heart of molten cheddar. A heap of piping hot nachos, extra queso. And that all-American standby mac and cheese. Pity the lactose intolerant. Cheddar and American cheeses take center stage in these family favorites, but their brassy color is a big part of their bite. To understand why, we need to go back in time. The art of cheese making dates back 4,000 years to the time of the pharaohs.
I'll give me cheese, baby.
But while we don't know exactly where or when the first cheese was made, we do know it became popular throughout Europe and the Middle East in the days of the Roman Empire. Possibly because of Julius Caesar's midnight pizza cravings.
I like it a pizza pie.
The Romans loved cheese so much they even had separate kitchens where they could privately cut the cheese. From Parmesan to Swiss, Gouda to Gorgonzola, Europeans mastered the art, with one variety in particular rising quickly in the ranks: the orange cheddar. Expert eater Dan Pashman explains why it's definitely a horse or cheese of a different color.
I love nachos. I love a grilled cheese with some cheddar cheese, but maybe also some American cheese to add the gooey, oozy factor. My favorite dishes with melted cheddar cheese are really all the dishes with melted cheddar cheese. Where it's melted and it's cheddar cheese, those ones. The English have been making cheddar since the 11th century in a village called Cheddar. I know, what are the odds, right? The original English cheddars have this classic yellow-orange kind of a hue to them, and that comes from the milk that's used to make them. It's a super high-quality milk that comes from a special breed of cows. Now, these cows just hang out all day, eating grass high in beta-carotene, and these cows store that beta-carotene in their fat, and that's what gives the cheese its signature color.
Other animals, like goats and buffaloes, don't store beta-carotene in their fat the way cheddar cows do, which is why goat and buffalo cheeses are white. And sorry, blue cheese doesn't come from blue grass. You can thank delicious blue mold for that stuff.
And as long as you keep drinking it, I'll keep giving it.
So, when traditional cheddar cheese was orange, people knew they were getting the good stuff. But in the 17th century, cheddar makers started to get greedy and began skimming off the top. Literally.
So people knew they were getting the super high quality, super fatty, rich, delicious cheddar cheese when they saw that signature color. But then the English cheesemakers got greedy. They said, hey, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna skim the fat off the milk and turn it into butter. Now we can sell cheese and butter and make twice as much money. Problem is, when they took the fat out of the milk, the cheddar cheese turned white. People were like, what gives?
Cheesemakers were essentially making low-fat cheese before the low-fat diet craze was even a thing. But some people knew immediately that someone was chinsing their cheddar. So cheesemakers decided to employ good old-fashioned deceptive business practices.
They put carrot juice and saffron and other things into the cheese to give it back the color while still being able to make bank on their butter.
And no one was the wiser, except maybe this kid. Of course, this profitable deception found its way across the Atlantic.
In the late 1800s, American cheesemakers started making a lot of their cheeses yellow, partly because of the cheddar tradition, partly because they wanted a uniform color. You know, people just like an orange cheese. There's something about it that's classic. Nowadays, most American cheeses are colored with something called annatto. It's a food coloring that comes from trees.
So maybe it's not natural, but orange cheese is now as American as red, white, and blue. If you ask me, this one deserves the gold. You know what else is undeniably American? Democracy. Although politics can certainly make people see red. But could politics also make carrots orange? Find out when Food, Fact or Fiction returns. Carrots, if they were blue, or green, or better yet, purple? Well, we used to, all the time, and we loved them. But what changed? Before the 17th century, almost all carrots were purple. That's right. Orange carrots, as we know them today, were cultivated by Dutch growers who selectively developed a sweeter orange variety, purportedly to honor the man who helped lead the struggle for Dutch independence in the 16th century. His name? William of Orange.
Well, hello there.
And we mustn't forget the Dutch royal family. They belong to an extremely colorful lineage known as the House of Orange. Close enough. Now, no one knows for sure if the Dutch really grew orange carrots to honor their heroes, but the color caught on, and the world has been tickled orange ever since. Oh, now I feel bad for Gary of Purple. Some prefer chocolate, others vanilla. But with red velvet cake, there's a little something for everyone. The vanilla-kissed cream cheese frosting, that hint of cocoa. This elegantly named cake has many queenly qualities. But does this scarlet hue somehow enhance the cake's decadent flavor? Or was red velvet cake a sales stunt? Velvet cakes weren't always so vibrant. In fact, they were around long before they got so hot under the collar. In the 1800s, cooks began using almond flour, cocoa, and cornstarch to soften cake batter for a finer texture. The new method yielded cakes so smooth that bakers began referring to them as velvet.
Ooh.
But according to dessert archaeologist Matt Lewis, even back then, the red velvets had something to blush about.
Well, red velvet cake is two parts, right? It's red, and that's because of the actual color of the cake. And velvet was referring to the texture, kind of like a smooth, velvety texture. When you mix cocoa powder, baking soda, and vinegar together, you get a reaction. At one point, this reaction would actually kind of turn the whole thing a reddish hue. In the early 20th century, red velvet cake was known as either red cake or mahogany cake, and it was almost more brown than red. It was definitely not as red as the red velvet cake we know today.
So how did a subtle blush become that deep scarlet shade?
So the red velvet cake in its current form, we think was supposedly originated by this struggling Texas businessman. His name was John A. Adams, and of course, he owned a food, dye, and extract company.
I like colors.
According to legend, John A. Adams and his wife visited New York's famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel in the 1930s, where they tasted a velvet cake with that faint chemically induced red hue, and he was like, whoa, this is like so good. Around the same time, Congress had just passed a bill regulating food coloring, which meant food dye companies, like his, had to work extra hard to get some income back. So he figured, why not take that delicious reddish cake recipe, add a whole bunch of food coloring to the batter, and then the color of the cake will really pop and, I'll get rich. I can't do it.
And pop it did. By the 1940s, Mr. Adams had perfected his recipe for red velvet cake and featured it in an advertising blitz.
The recipes and ingredients for red velvet cake were sold together at supermarkets throughout the U.S. during World War II, and this made John A. Adams a very rich man.
So, as cakes got redder, Mr. Adams' pockets got greener, leading to a sweet string of successes.
The red velvet cake in the 1960s was everywhere. It even won top prize at the Maryland State Fair in 1960.
But things quickly went from sweet to sour.
In the 1970s, the red velvet cake really started to trend downward. There's two reasons. The first was, a lot of critics thought it was kind of a boring cake. The second reason is the FDA really started to crack down on red food dye itself. It's always been known that red food dye is not great for you, but it started to have this really monstrous connotation due to the FDA enforcing it and making it a bigger thing than it really was.
It's ruining the country.
Well, how do you like that?
As a result, the notorious red dye number 2 was yanked from the shelves, and any edible remotely red took a hit. Growing public concern abruptly put an end to red velvet's glorious run. But only temporarily. As time passed and the dust settled, safe dye alternatives popped back up, and artificially red foods return. Now, thanks to upscale bakeries and a renewed love of classic comfort food, this ruby beauty is once more the crowning jewel of the cake stand. Welcome back. From wedding cakes to cupcakes, pancakes to cookies, red velvet is both distinctive and versatile. Heck, you can even find a red velvet body mist. Great, now I'm hungry again. Red velvet and chocolate are cocoa cousins. But where does white chocolate fit in the family photo? Find out when Food, Fact, or Fiction returns. Melts in your mouth and even comes in chips. But the contentious question remains, is white chocolate really chocolate? According to chocolate purists, no. Strictly speaking, chocolate must contain cocoa solids and chocolate liquor, neither of which is found in white chocolate. It's widely believed that the Swiss first figured out how to mix cocoa butter with a little sugar and milk to make something that melts just like chocolate. American chocolatiers followed suit, and we've been using the misnomer ever since. Well, you had me at chocolate. From ruddy cheddar to red velvet, it's clear that our eyes play an important part in our enjoyment of food. But what does science say on the subject? Does color really affect taste? Imagine for a second, your favorite foods lost all their color. Would eating lose all appeal?
I think so, yeah. I don't know. I guess I'd have to taste it.
I wouldn't even try it, to be honest.
I don't know. I'll give it a shot, see what it's like.
Our resident food nerd, Dan Kohler, has set up a super sweet test to find out if we can really taste with our eyes.
We're about to do a sneaky little experiment here. Each slice of cake has been prepared with the exact same ingredients, except the icing has been changed with an odorless, flavorless food coloring. We want to find out if that food coloring has any effect on the perceived taste of each slice of cake.
One lucky taste tester has been blindfolded and will now sample a bite of each cake. Hey, you know I was available. No one thought to ask me? Nice.
All right, Maureen, I'm about to feed you a bite from 4 different slices of cake, and all I want you to do is tell me what it tastes like each time.
Okay. I believe it tastes like vanilla. So this one also, I believe, has a vanilla taste. I'm tripping up, but I think that this one also tastes like vanilla. Okay, now I think I'm crazy, because this one tastes exactly like the last one, I think.
Great, so right now you think they all taste like vanilla. You think they all taste the exact same.
I believe so, yes.
That's terrific, because they are, in fact, the exact same piece of cake.
With our control now in place, it's time for the real test. Our guinea pig will now do it without the blindfold, so she can see the colors of the cake as she eats. Let's see if she changes her tune.
All right, it's time to eat 4 new slices of cake, and this time I want you to tell me what you're tasting each time you take a bite.
So this one tastes, I think, slightly like strawberries, or maybe raspberries.
Okay.
So this one's kind of like slightly bitter. I don't know if it reminds me of like a lime or something kind of citrusy.
Okay.
Oh wow, so this one's a lot richer and thicker than these two.
Really?
It's like a mousse or something. Super chocolatey, by far my favorite. I don't really know how to describe this one. It's kind of odd, and slightly reminds me of coconut, and I hate coconut.
Oh, all right. Are you ready for me to blow your mind?
Yeah.
Every one of these cakes, the exact same.
These are not the exact same cake.
The only thing that's different is the food coloring.
But they taste so different. I swear to you, this one does not taste like that at all.
Not only are these 4 pieces that you just ate the exact same, but they're the exact same as the cake you ate while you were blindfolded. And when you were blindfolded, you knew that they were the same. But now that you can see, you've been tricked.
Whether she believes it or not, our experiment proves that color can really make a difference in the taste department. But why? We'll find out when Food, Fact, or Fiction returns. Food nerd Dan Kohler showed us how the colors we see on the plate
I want you to tell me what you're tasting each time you take a bite.
So this one tastes, I think, slightly like strawberries, or maybe raspberries.
Okay.
can actually influence the flavors we experience.
Every one of these cakes, the exact same.
These are not the exact same cakes.
But what's the bottom line? Taste buds or eyeballs? Who's in charge here?
When it comes to flavor, our brains are synthesizing information from a number of different senses. We've got our tongues, sense of taste, we've got our eyes, sense of sight, and our nose, the sense of smell. Now, when the brain takes all that information, it relays it back to you and tells you what you're eating. When our test subject saw the cake, she was experiencing flavor with her eyes before her tongue had any chance. So her brain was interpreting flavor that wasn't even there in any of the cakes at all.
Incredible, right? How could our brains be so easily tricked?
Our brains would never have grown to the size they are right now if we hadn't actually developed the ability to understand and interpret food based on its color. So we know instinctively somewhere in our bodies that we need a variety of nutrients, and we get those nutrients by eating foods of different colors, which we've developed a sense to see. There are definitely some colors we see in nature that are our warning that we should not eat those foods. Specifically, blue is a color you see oftentimes in mold and bacterial growth, so you mostly subconsciously stay away from blue foods. Those are a no-no to our brain.
So when our taste tester couldn't quite say what the blue cake tasted like, her eyes were sending signals to her brain that something just didn't add up. But this evolutionary trick can also give our waistlines a big advantage, or disadvantage.
The belief is that white is the color that makes us the hungriest, and consequently the rumor is that that's why fancy restaurants use beautiful white plates and beautiful white linens. But the truth of the psychology of how hungry we are actually goes a lot deeper than that. Our perception of how much food we eat and how hungry we are is based on something called the Delboeuf illusion. If your food contrasts in the color to your plate, you will understand how much is there better than if the food doesn't contrast. So if I had potato chips and I poured them into a white bowl, I would not understand how much is there as easily as I would if I poured them into a dark bowl. So consequently, if you're trying to trick your brain into eating less, remember, color contrast between plate and food, really important.
So if you're in a diner, but on a diet, maybe try the blue plate special. Or not. Either way, the next time I need to lose a few pounds before bikini season, you better believe I'll be sporting a pair of these. Ooh, purple velvet. Ruby. Today we learned that some crafty cheesemakers use a little orange to put their business in the black. That red velvet is good, but redder is better. And that our eyes help flavor our food, whether we like it or not. No meal is complete without a spoonful of fact and a dash of fiction.